You're welcome back. Movers and shakers from the mining and investment capitals of the world converged on Cape Town for the 2015 Investing in African Mining Indaba. The gathering held against the backdrop of a sluggish economy being experienced by host country South Africa and a slowing global economic environment. But as our Southern Africa correspondent Marcel Gordon reports, the sustainable development and mining of Africa's natural resources is still a major talking point.
Where the world connects with African mining. That is the slogan connected to this year's Mining Indaba, and the world is indeed represented. The wheeling and dealing is happening in every space available at the Cape Town International Convention Centre. Organizations like the African Union and the United Nations are also here, preaching the gospel of the African mining vision, which is to see the continent's natural resources leading to broader-based development.
This is a very good time to be in Africa. I mean, we're all talking about the African narrative and the Africa growth trajectory and how that's improving. And I think that private companies are also buying into that. And this is a business that it's a profit business. And I think we have to shift a little bit from the word extractives in terms of extract and taking to building and integrating and embedding people within that. But the profit side is a staple. It's not something that you can get away from. So I think that narrative is shifting. I think there is a greater understanding that you can't just stay in a siloed business, in an enclave where you're making the profits and those profits are not permeating down to the people. But I think as you get to more Indabas, you know, the reality of what that means concretely, I think will begin to sink in.
Mining in Africa goes back 600 years. I think some of the first Chinese miners negotiations were way back in 1405. And so definitely in terms of the historically, there's huge opportunities. And I always look at one of our big factors in Africa is our middle class African development. Huge numbers. You know, you're looking at currently it's 1 billion people in Africa, and they predict that will be 1.5 billion in 10 years' time. So that gives you an idea of what the sustainability will be, because the pressure will always be there and the demand will be there from the local public.
A peaceful and stable political environment is a major key to attracting further investment.
I think many African governments realize that, you know, if you don't have peace, you don't have security, in a way that's a disincentive to the promotion and exploitation of mineral resources. So there are many elections that are taking place this year, especially 2015 in Africa. And that for me is like almost the foundational stone for governance, for, you know, your foreign direct investment, for the way in which private sector would feel incentivized to come or not to come to these countries and to be part of that broader based development that I was talking about.
With 7,000 participants representing 110 countries, the number of deals being negotiated and indeed signed here at the Mining Indaba will be mind-blowing. But the question remains, how much of that interaction is taking place between African countries?
I think there's need to increase communication within the continent. Oftentimes we look outside of the continent for investment, for people to understand better what the continent has. But it should first start with the Africans knowing what they have. And so the program has 3 main components. One is on knowledge management, which is basically focusing on getting information on what African countries have, information on best practices of how they are managing it and putting it out there for the ordinary African citizens to appreciate what the continent have, but more importantly, to give information that can encourage trade exchanges between African member states.
The Investing in Africa Mining Indaba runs until Thursday.
Let's now join Marcel Gordon in Cape Town, South Africa for more on the program.
We're coming to you from Cape Town, just outside the Cape Town International Convention Centre, where behind me, you'll see the hustle and bustle of the 2015 Investing in Africa Mining Indaba. Over the coming days, you'll see around 7,000 participants coming in and out of this precinct, where there'll be a lot of wheeling and dealing happening, of course, but also a lot of sharing in knowledge around the mining industry worldwide, but also in Africa. Around 110 countries are represented here by those 7,000 participants. And we have a very special guest willing to speak to us about those very specific issues when it comes to mining in Africa, and that's Mrs. Fatima Denton. She is the Director of Special Initiatives Division for the UN Economic Commission for Africa, and she has given us some of her time in this very busy schedule here at the Mining Indaba to speak to us about the issues that will be close to her and her organization's heart. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Now, last year there was a lot of talk about the African mining vision. Can you tell us a bit more about how that movement has gained traction since the last time all of these people gathered here for the African Indaba?
Okay, thank you very much. I think the African mining vision is the vision of African heads of states to basically set the tone in the way mineral resources are exploited and utilized, and the profits from mineral resources are utilized for the benefit of a broader development, a development that would sustain other sectors, productive sectors, be that energy, water, education, etc. So I think it's gaining a lot of traction beyond what it says. And this meeting yesterday and even today was more about getting an understanding in terms of how will the African mining vision support this whole notion of broader based development. What are some of the most tangible things that it can do? Because a vision is something, but you have to break the vision down into concrete activities on the ground. So I think from that perspective, it's becoming a known thing between private sectors, and I think that's the most important constituency, because the idea is that there has to be some kind of a compact, there has to be some kind of an agreement, a contract between governments and private sector. That will be based on shared values, equity, sustainable development, in ways that would ensure that the dividends, the profits from mineral resources are utilized in many ways that would benefit people, that would benefit the economies of Africa, and that would translate into concrete jobs, sustainable jobs. So I think from that perspective, we are making a good traction in terms of a broader understanding of what it is, but ensuring that it just doesn't stay a vision, it doesn't stay a framework. It becomes more of a practical reality on the ground to say, concretely, the African mining vision is enabling countries in Africa to negotiate better contracts. It's enabling countries in Africa to build their human and institutional capacity. It's enabling them to think through ways of how they could benefit, the whole aspect of beneficiation of local content, and giving that a little bit more content, more meaning, so that we do not just remain with these aspirational values and then just stay at that sort of higher level without breaking it down into very tangible outcomes.
Now, coming to a gathering like this is quite an experience. In your experience, do you find that there's been a change in the atmosphere at these Indabas, in that it's not just about Western investors coming in here, making fast deals and then heading off back to their colder climes, if I can call it that? Is there an understanding that African countries are very much becoming more the masters of their own destiny when it comes to its natural resources?
Yes, I think there is that sort of aspiration, and I think you can see that aspiration is beginning to translate into a new reality, a new dawn. I mean, this is a very good time to be in Africa. I mean, we're all talking about the African narrative and the Africa growth trajectory and how that's improving. And I think that private companies are also buying into that. And this is a business that it's a profit business, and I think we have to shift a little bit from the word extractives in terms of extract and taking to building and integrating and embedding people within that. But the profit side is a staple. It's not something that you can get away from. So I think that narrative is shifting. I think there is a greater understanding that you can't just stay in a siloed business, in an enclave where you're making the profits and those profits are not permeating down to the people. But I think as you get to more Indabas, you know, the reality of what that means concretely, I think will begin to sink in. But I think we are getting there. We're going from a vision, from a narrative, to concretely this is how it would look like. I think it's more in the how that we need to kind of put a lot of content to.
If I can ask you just one final question. Over the last 2 years or so, we've seen a number of elections taking place in Africa. Domestic politics is a huge, regional politics as well, is a huge issue when it comes to mining and other things around natural resources. Do you think that the next few years that we're moving into, when it comes to domestic politics, that there is a better understanding of how important a stable environment is to investment?
Yeah, I think you've put a finger on it, because I think the governance issue, the business environment that would enable, facilitate, foster good business for mining, for the way in which extractives, the extractive industries can foster growth. I think those are things that we must try and promote in most African countries. And I think that again is changing. I think many African governments realize that, you know, if you don't have peace, you don't have security, in a way that's a disincentive to the promotion and exploitation of mineral resources. So there are many elections that are taking place this year, especially 2015 in Africa. And that for me is like almost the foundational stone for governance, for, you know, your foreign direct investment, for the way in which private sector would feel incentivized to come or not to come to these countries, and to be part of that broader based development that I was talking about. I think the important thing is the private sector don't need to feel that they're there and they're somehow peripheralized, they're just in it for the business. I think it has to be a space provider where governments are able to also make space, and where private sector realize that they're operating within a certain set of, you know, values, culture, and that their inputs are felt across the wider community. So it ripples through the wider community in terms of jobs, in terms of better social conditions, but just in terms of a feel-good factor in general, you know, so that people feel that they can actually see the benefits of mineral resources. So I think, yes, this is all changing. Elections are here, and we're all very conscious that it can be a make or break issue for a mining company to come or not to come. But I think it's all changing favorably.
Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you.
Those are just some of the very important issues that will be discussed over the coming days here at the Mining Indaba in Cape Town. That was Mrs. Fatima Denton, the Director of Special Initiatives Division for the UN Economic Commission for Africa. For TVC News, I'm Marcel Gordon. Back to you in Lagos.
Thank you, Marcel. And that's all we have for you on Business Week at this time. I leave you with the graphics of African commodities markets. Join us again next time. Bye for now.